Here is how to never FAP again. Okay, so I haven't done this ever since I put this in my mind, ever since it crystallized, ever since I was convinced by it. I never once again had a relapse. I never once again thought about it. I never had to do it again. And it was very simple. I thought to myself, I had to first understand what the problem was, right? Because if you think if it's not a problem and you take it very lightly, well, then you'll treat it as such. But it was very simple. I thought to myself, okay, a couple of rules that I set out for myself to be able to make sure that this didn't happen again, right? To never have to FAP again. Um, excuse me. I had a little bit of a topo, so it's bubbly, so naturally it's getting to me. But anyhow, so the first thing I did was if I wasn't gonna get any play in real life, then I just wasn't gonna be able to let out anything, right? None of my seed was gonna spill. So that automatically put me in overdrive because I was like, I have to, it gave me the impetus to get out there and get it. Quite literally, right? Because now I had to really use the energy to get outside in real life and find women and figure that part out, right? Otherwise, I was gonna stay stuck. So that immediately prompted me into action. And so sometimes you have to give yourself incentives to force yourself to do things you don't naturally want to do because it's a lot easier to stay home, pull up some pixelated images and wild out, right? Wild out on your own. And so that was the first part, right? Was that I had to force myself to get outside. So that was number one. The second thing I had to do was I had to realize there was something really disturbing about watching things that would prompt me to do this thing that I didn't want to do, right? So immediately I had to remove the triggers. The triggers in this case were anything that was sexual in nature. So the algorithm had to become very aesthetic for me. I had to get rid of anything that was explicit or that would trigger any thoughts related to that. Okay, that was the other thing I did. The other major distraction I had to do was I had to start working out religiously every day to distract myself and to have something in place, right? That was super important for me as well. And then really the other thing is it was psychological, and this was that the fact that I had normalized, you know, doing this to myself was the crazy part. I had made it so that it was normal to kind of, rub one out, call it a day. And it was something that I fell into young. I fell into young and developed a habit. And it was really hard to break. It was really hard to break because then the reality was that it just became excessive in the sense that, the simple things weren't enough to get me excited anymore, right? Things had to get more complicated. Right? I had to find, midgets, midgets in a jumper getting down, or some crazy stuff, real fringe stuff that I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit, but that's how far I had taken this situation, right? And like I said, once I set out that I was committed to this idea, it was very clear to me that I was like, man, this is gonna be like the mission, right? The mission is to, all right, like I have to replace this bad habit. And so what did I do? It prompted me into action. It prompted me to figure out creative, novel ways to keep myself busy. I joined a sports team. I started reading avidly. I started socializing. I started getting outside. Anything to distract me and to make sure that I didn't fall into the traps. All right. And the other thing is not giving yourself any sort of time to ruminate. Because as soon as you start having some time where you're a little bored, you start, getting on your phone. And that's when things can get really ugly and turn for the worse. So if you find yourself in that situation, it's super important to make sure that you find the things that are going to replace it. Otherwise, it's very easy to relapse, to go back to your old ways. But I think the major driving force for me was that I put it in my head and I made this a law for myself. I said, I'm not spilling anything unless it's the real thing. It was that simple. And if I couldn't get anything, then that means that I needed to really work on myself and think, okay, why am I not sexually appealing to anyone? That would make me think, okay, so then I need to clearly work on myself. There's something not going right. What do I need to do? So maybe you need to ask yourself those questions, right? What do you need to do to make yourself somebody that is wants to desire you sexually. And if those are not the questions that you're having for yourself, then you really need to figure that out, because that's super important. To think that that would be the easy escape, right? That is the emergency valve, is to go run away and do something on your own. But the reality is, if you really want to have some profound changes in your life, you need to think about that part, okay? Because then, like I said, once I cracked the code on that, it was easy in the sense that I didn't have to worry about where my next, instead of it's funny, instead of saying where my next meal was coming from, I didn't have to think where was the next, bit of play gonna come from. Okay, where was the next girl gonna come from, or the next woman? Like, I wasn't worried about that part. I knew it was gonna happen. And surprisingly, it was very easy. It was quite effortless once I got into the flow, because the reality was that wasn't the priority anymore. It became sort of it was not, yeah, it wasn't a big deal. I think once I was able to wrestle control from that lust, I was okay. I felt good, and I felt like I'm cool with a couple dry spells, a couple weeks, a month. It was not a big deal, because I had other things on my plate, so I wasn't concerned so much. It wasn't the priority like it was when I was a lusty little glutton, out here, you know, doing these things. And the other thing too, you got to think about, this is probably the most embarrassing part, is you look at yourself in the mirror while you're doing this. There's nothing sexy, redeemable, nothing about that you can even remotely say that is not embarrassing. I think that's what stayed with me, and I never went back. Truth be told, I never had to go back. And I hope that you can understand why, once you make that decision, you make a clear decision that this is not something that has control over you, it's not that easy to stop. And you'll never have to do it again. Like I said, I never even think about having to do that again. And I think if you follow these strategies, I think you'll feel the same. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.